Toyotomi Hideyoshi invaded the Kishu Peninsula in March of 1585, and by May, he had basically won. There were those who put up a fight, like the Saika Ikki, the armed monks of Koyasan, and a few of Kishu's lords, but eventually they either surrendered or were crushed unceremoniously beneath the wheels of the warlord's military machine. For Hideyoshi, the conquest of Kishu was a short campaign to get his blood flowing before he attacked the island of Shikoku. But for the people of Kishu, Hideyoshi's campaign was one of the most important events in cultural memory. As such, it's inspired more than its fair share of whispers and legends. So for our final look at the Kishu War, we're going to examine some of the many folktales forged in the fumes of battle. Perhaps the largest impact Hideyoshi's invasion had on Wakayama was the name Wakayama. The etymology of the name, which means literally Waka Poetry Mountain, or more poetically, Singing Mountain, is uncertain. As with all names, there are any number of dubious folk etymologies. However, the region that was once known as Saika was first called Kishu Wakayama in Hideyoshi's letters shortly after he defeated the Saika Ikki. Our first legend takes us to the city of Arida. At the foot of Mount Atago, there's a rock said to be blessed with the power to stop infants from crying. There are many such rocks all over Japan, though I doubt they all have such dark origins. The story of this rock involves Hideyoshi's brother and general, Hidenaga. About a year before Hideyoshi's invasion was to begin, Hidenaga had an affair with a noble's daughter named Kasumi, who lived in Kishu. She became engaged to a distant noble and departed Kishu, and Hidenaga always felt as though he had been cast aside. So when he led his army through town, he took personal pleasure in burning down the castle where Kasumi had lived. As the locals pulled themselves out of the wreckage the next day, they found a woman, badly burned. However, the young child in her arms appeared to be fine. She left the child atop the rock, then cast herself into the river. The locals who raised the child said she grew up to look just like Kasumi. Hideyoshi himself was also fond of arson, and he cavalierly set fire to temples and shrines as he marched south. The people of Gobo had advance warning of Hideyoshi's army, and parishioners of the city's Honganji temple took their principal object of worship and fled into the mountains. Once Hideyoshi had departed the peninsula, they returned it to the temple. There it remained for another decade, until for unexplained reasons it was stolen by priests of a Shinto shrine from the next town over. They held it under strict guard. A veteran of the wars against Hideyoshi reasoned that a small, one-man party should be able to penetrate the outer defense, and he volunteered himself for this role. He successfully broke into the camp, but as he was strapping the Buddha to his back, he was discovered. He fled as the enemy fired arrows at him, some of them hitting their marks. The soldier was bloodied and wounded by the time he returned to Gobo. As he placed the idol on the ground, he discovered that it had taken an arrow to the heart, protecting him from an arrowhead that would have gone straight through his neck. That statue still remains in the temple, though unfortunately it's not on public display. Our last story features a citizen of Gobo, namely Yukawa Naoharu, the protagonist of my previous video on the subject. Yukawa fought to the last against Hideyoshi's ambitions. Days before his castle was burned by the warlord's army, he met with some of his top staff and assembled a massive war chest of both gold and weapons. They buried the hoard among the nearby mountains so that they could retrieve it when need be. However, the loss of Kameyama Castle scattered Yukawa's men, and Yukawa himself was driven into Kumano, far from his buried treasure. He died not long after, and once the war was done, some of Yukawa's men went into the mountains to look for the cache. As they wandered among the trees, looking for familiar scenery, they spied a distant figure standing on a ridge. It must have been Yukawa himself, returned from the dead. But as they approached, the apparition vanished, like mist. Yukawa's retainers, shaken by the visitation, failed to find the treasure. And as far as anyone knows, it's still out there. Of course, all of this is impossible to prove. Who's to say where the holes in a statue come from, or why parents place their infants on top of a rock? It doesn't fundamentally matter whether or not Yukawa's gold is still out there. What matters is that the gravitational pull of Hideyoshi's conquest is so strong that it warps stories of buried treasure or temple idols around it. Most of the temples Hideyoshi burned have been rebuilt, but the impact his armies left on Wakayama's cultural memory is eternal.